I mean, last week we had really such a great discussion of popular cyber cultures and really questions of terminal penetration and prosthetic memory, and really just really great, critical comments from the many different really eloquent perspectives in the class. Really such great comments on, what really is the status of technology. Does technology come alive? What is that kind of changed interface between human beings and machines? And I just want to go to two pieces at the end of Scott Buchatman's article on terminal penetration itself. Buchatman has a very nice piece in which he says, really in the sense of, the experience of technology, he says this, and he's quoting from Werner Vigny's novella, True Names. And he's really talking about sort of the integration of human minds into a technoscape and saying, but they were experiencing what no human had ever known, a sensory bandwidth thousands of times normal. For seconds that just seemed without end, their minds were filled with a jumble verging on pain, data that wasn't information, and information that wasn't knowledge. To hear 10 million simultaneous phone calls, to see the continent's entire video output, should have been a white noise. Instead, it was a tidal wave of detail rammed through the tinier apertures of their minds. He controlled more than raw data now. If he could master them, the continent's computers could process this avalanche. More seconds passed, but now with a sense of time as he struggled to distribute his very consciousness through the system. As he struggled to distribute his very consciousness through the system. I mean, really dreams, post-dreams of Marshall McLuhan's notion of cybernetic consciousness, and of Teilhard de Chardin, the French theologian's notion of a noosphere, of electronically knowable information itself. And if you go to the last article, which is Alison Landsberg, really wonderful article on prosthetic memory herself. Alison Landsberg really continues the theme because she says, by prosthetic memories, I mean memories which don't come from a person's life experience in any strict sense. They are implanted memories. And the article is like this kind of vivid and eloquent reflection on technology and the mediascape as implanting memories in our minds. Page 191, and I quote, although memory might have been always prosthetic, the mass media technologies which structure and circumscribe experience bring the texture and contours of prosthetic memory into dramatic relief. Because the mass media fundamentally alter our notion of what counts as experience, they might be a privileged arena for the production and circulation of prosthetic memories. The media implant simulated experiences, a world of implanted memories, how to speak, how to feel, how to interact, how to talk. Our memories then implanted. And when I read the article, I thought, well, what about those focus groups, research, where before, for example, any movies or TV shows are marketed, they're first test driven by sampled viewers. The reactions of the viewers are then the basis for re-editing the movie. So what you think when you go to the movie is you see as an original has already been cybernetically tailored to your taste. It's been edited to your taste. You're asked a question which has already been answered. You like the movie, you like the television show, your response is prepackaged. You are a relay in a circuit of consumption. And the same thing I would say applies not just to the world of entertainment, but applies as well to the world of politics itself. And we're going through, just about like a turbulent period. All the elites know, like Torricelli, the senator from New Jersey, just resigned. And he's made an interesting comment. He says the United States is going to war. I thought that's a very interesting comment. No one's declared war yet. And I thought, well, but the prepackaging of how we feel and how we perceive the world is really the kind of massaging of perspectives is really well underway itself. So I wonder how much, Alison Landsberg's really eloquent article on prosthetic memory is not just about Total Recall and Blade Runner, but really comes outside those movies itself to be a pretty accurate description of the way in which the media operate. Now, the reason I wanted to just comment on that is I want to show a film today which is made by a company called Galafilm, which is a great cinema production company here in Montreal. And they did this film called After Darwin, which doesn't talk about digital technology as much as it talks about biotechnology, and which really begins to throw into question the relationship of the human to robotics, the relationship of human beings to genetic engineering itself. And I thought it was sort of like a timely, nice time to show the film, because here the discussion to date's been on popular cyber cultures and through movies really talking about the space of the interface between human and machines and what represents our technological future. And in the next article that we're going to deal with really in depth next week, this is really classic article, which is on page 291 of the text, which is the article by Donna Haraway, who's from the University of Santa Cruz in California, called A Cyborg Manifesto, Science, Technology, and Socialist Feminism in the Late 20th Century. But really the article is on what happens to identity and gender and work experience in the age of the cyborg itself. So the film, After Darwin, really comes between these two because it starts to throw into question as well the question of what constitutes the human in an age not only of digital technology, but an age of genetic engineering. But that's just for a moment. But before that, let me give you the questions for the midterm, okay? From reflection to examinations. No, these are take-home exams. Ted, do you want a copy? These are take-home, and you have from now until October 16th to do it. Then just come in at the beginning of the class on October 16th and just hand in your responses. And the responses, I'd say like a minimum of 3 pages, a max of 5 pages each, not for the whole thing, but each. Because I think each of these would require probably at least 3 pages to make a statement. But I'm not particularly hung up on the length of it, but I really do care about the quality of the response that you do. That's, and creativity would be very nice. Sorry, let's hit this too there. Hi. I don't think you want an exam. Yes, you can. Let me just go through them. The hi. Just 3. You have to do 3. I ask you to do 3 questions. And the mandatory question, yes. Oh God, I'm sorry. I thought you had it. I apologize. Oh, well. So goes my sense of geography. Everyone got a. Let me just go through them. The mandatory question here is question number 1. It's write your technological autobiography. Now, what kind of question is that? What I like to do in question number 1 is just relax, no panic, and just think about, just creatively think of you, in fact, what your relationship to the question of technology is. You can use any medium that you want, or you don't have to use any medium. You can just have reflection. But if you want to talk sometimes through computers, through cinema, through television, through cell phones, or just more generally reflect on the question of technology and, in fact, what your relationship to technology is, that's good. There's no correct way to answer this question whatsoever. The purpose of the question is just to follow like Donna Haraway in some ways, to sort of break down thinking, which separates sort of technology from ourself, and just think about yourself in terms of, well, do I have a technological self, and what does that mean? And to just try to think this creatively and follow it through, okay? And I just put in your response, keep in mind, as we discussed in class and from your own readings, that far from being an object we can hold outside ourselves, that technology refers to the ways in which we use technology to represent the world to ourselves, computers and cinema and television and books and architecture and theater. In this sense, our activities are often shaped by how we respond to the technological environment within which we are immersed. Now, that's the polite way of saying it. Because, I mean, that's saying that technology is also, found in the ways in which it's represented. That follows from Michael Benedict's perspective, right? But really, if you read like the articles like Buchatman's terminal penetration, Alison Landsberg's prosthetic memory, they make a far more radical claim. They really claim that technology is not about representations, but we ourselves become a representation of technology. Because if you've got prosthetic memories, then you're a tech head, basically. You've been sort of like immersed, not only immersed within technology, but you've really become like a technological self. And I'd be sort of interested to hear what you have to say about, well, what kind of technological selves you are. Or, on the other hand, you might answer that by saying, I have no technological autobiography for the following reasons, because I don't agree with this whole thesis. That's great. just make your argument. Okay, so there's definitely no correct answer to one, that's for sure. There's just interesting writing. Okay, part B, answer 2 of the following questions. And the first one, just pretty straightforward. In their articles, Benedict's Cyberspace First Steps and Arturo Escobar's Welcome to Siberia, those 2 articles that we discussed, present very different visions of the technological future. Compare and contrast the merits of each argument, and then on this basis, present your own perspective on the future of cyberculture. So the idea with that is to really begin with the text of 2 really basic core arguments. One a very utopian perspective, and the other much more realist perspective, critical realist perspective on the question of technology itself. And on the basis of really understanding those arguments, then in fact think, well, where do you stand in relationship to these perspectives? What is your perspective itself? Okay? So it asks you to understand the text, and then just go beyond the understanding of the text to think of your own perspective. And again, you might find, well, what could I say ever better than Arturo Escobar captures? I mean, that's quite conceivable. Then just state your reasons. So 3, just a short quote from Donna Haraway's The Cyborg Manifesto. A cyborg is a cybernetic organism, a hybrid of machines and organism, a creature of social reality, as well as a creature of fiction. And we're going to be discussing Donna Haraway's The Cyborg Manifesto next week. So really as a question, and you can rephrase this question any way you want. I just would like, if you're going to answer on Haraway, just think about what Haraway has to say. Discuss Haraway's The Cyborg Manifesto in terms of what it reveals about questions of political identity in a culture coded by the informatics of domination. And in the article herself, there's a whole section in the article about the informatics of domination, because she's saying, well, she begins the article by saying, the interfaces between human beings, machines, and human beings and plants have all been broken down. There's these basic forms of boundaries have been broken down, and today we live in a culture of really blurred boundaries. Like today, in the mail came a very nice new publication from the Simpson Center of the Humanities in Seattle, funded by Microsoft, actually. And this was about semiotic flesh. It's about flesh and metal for, a very good group coming out of Concordia University. It's about, breaking boundaries between machines on the one hand and human beings on the other. And Haraway focuses on this because Haraway wants to say, well, what does this mean for feminism? And what is our actual situation when you live within a culture of the informatics of domination? What forms of domination follow from this, but also what forms of emancipation? So Haraway's article is just a really, you read it, it's a very fundamental, interesting piece of work, and it's been immensely influential. And I would just say that on the Haraway thing, I'm not interested, you can answer this question if you like, but if you're reading Haraway and you have something to say about Haraway that the question doesn't fit into it, then just do your own question on that, because I just want to read your reflections on Haraway. Okay? So this question is the general guideline, but there's lots of different perspectives you can take on the article itself. And if you're so inclined that you would like just to think Haraway and think her perspective, and this question itself doesn't really embrace what you want to do, then, well, change the question. Fair enough? I know, horrible. Or answer the question. Well, for write a conclusion, this would be as if you had been contacted by the publisher of this book that says, look at what the section 2, Popular Cybercultures, is missing. It's, has a good introduction, but it doesn't have a conclusion, which sort of thematically brings the pieces together and which relates it to, which begins to discuss concepts of terminal penetration and Alison Landsberg's sense of prosthetic memory in contemporary culture and society and politics. Brings those concepts up to date, really. So if you were to write a short conclusion, 3 pages, 4 or 5 pages, to the section 2 on focusing on concepts like, being human and being machine, terminal penetration or prosthetic memory, how would you in fact say that these occur in contemporary culture and politics and society? So that's all. Okay? Is that, yes?
Are you free to use other sources to support an argument?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, really, really encourage that. If you're making an argument and you wish to go to other sources, ideal. Okay? Because the whole idea of this as a take-home is not like memorization or anything of that sort. The whole idea is just try to provide some general questions so that in a reasonable period of time, within a reasonable writing, space of writing, 3 to 5 pages in each, you can just do some reflection on the text itself and things we've been discussing in class. Use other sources, that's really wonderful. Okay? It's really to develop and deepen your own perspective. Fair enough? They seem hard, the questions, or straightforward? Too easy? Okay.
The sources, you want them from other readings in the
Text, or if you've been reading things outside, like in your other courses or in your life, and there's other things you're interested in. Like Donna Haraway's.
specifically pertain to just the cyber culture.
No, not at all. I think you should feel free to do violence to things. No, not violence. I don't mean physical violence, but I mean, like Nietzsche, like Michel Foucault talking about Nietzsche said, well, the best way to honor a thinker is do violence to the thinker. You don't, you understand sort of their assumptions, but then you also insist on your own perspective. And I think that's sort of an honorable way to think in some ways. Okay, so I would think that if you approach like Donna Haraway, many perspectives you will develop. And think about her work, you will develop your own perspective. And if you think about terminal penetration and prosthetic memories, well, like last week, like the really great series of comments were made by people in the class. And what is really the status of technology itself and of cyberculture? So we could follow that through. Okay. And one thing I would just say finally that this last question, and also with relationship to 3, that the film we're about to see, which is After Darwin, really bears on this. So if you wanted to use an example, then you could just watch this film, and you certainly can use the film After Darwin for what it has to say about terminal penetration and prosthetic memory and being human and being machine. Okay, so with that little introduction, let me turn on this film. Now, let me be cyborg right now. Memories, but it's really about prosthetic genes implanted in human beings itself. And not just about terminal penetration, but as different perspectives in this film show, also about the possibility of eugenic creation, but also eugenic termination itself. And what about the idea that lies behind this film, that the refrain that kept coming up so often in so many different perspectives of this kind of really desire for eugenic purity, for a kind of hygienic genetic structure of human beings itself. No disease, no defects, no mutations. Is it possible that behind technology and the story of technology that we've been discussing in class is this tremendous drive to create like a kind of hygienic bubble, a kind of safety zone in some ways? And now this kind of illusion of the possibility of creating this has been transferred to the area of genetics itself. And also, just finally, I think that with this film in some ways, it really just shows the relationship in some ways between technology and ethics. That the technology, as Professor William Gates III professor says, that you can never hold science back. Once the genie or the gene is out of the bottle, then science will brush ahead. And in some ways, I think, in fact, in terms of the exuberant language of technology, that's really true. And the only problem with that is that the technology exists really as third millennium technology and is rapidly in place. Like, I think yesterday the mayor of Montreal, for example, said that the only way that he saw one really fruitful way to develop, Montreal in the third millennium is that, new tax money should be collected and it should go towards the creation of Montreal as a major center of the life sciences. So everything in this film sort of like just comes right off the film and into, the recombinant laboratories of Montreal itself. And it might be that we live then in a situation in which the technology is really third millennium technology, but our ethical perspectives in terms of our ability even to know the issues that are involved with this, lag a long way behind. So maybe we're living in a situation in which we really have just ethics lag in some ways. Like really just like, the old phrase of like the culture shock of technology has hit us, and ethics is just sort of standing still in some ways, really trying to get a grasp of what's radically changed in the situation itself. So, in terms of the midterm questions that I handed out, if you just wanted to use a film like this or other examples like this just to reflect on the question of technology and technological future, that's just a very productive, fruitful discussion. So that's been a long time of sitting. So why don't we just stop here tonight and then we'll just start up next week. And can I just say for next week, the article that we're going to focus on next week is going to be one article, and it's going to be on It's article number 18 in the book, and it's Donna Haraway's A Cyborg Manifesto. So really focus on that. Maybe just in reading Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto, which she talks about breaking boundaries, keep in mind the boundaries which are broken in this film of After Darwin. Okay, see you next week. Did everyone get a copy of the midterm?